I hit my first $1 million year in revenue for my e-commerce business back in 2021 with the help of virtual assistants. We still do $1 million a year in revenue to this day, and it's run by my team of 2 based in the Philippines. Here's everything I did to make it work. First off, hiring. When I had my first team members I brought on from overseas, I went through a lot. I'm not gonna lie, there was a lot of churning, and I attribute that fully to myself. That is my fault, my responsibility. And there's a couple aspects as to why that was the case. The first one was the salary range. I was looking for $2 an hour, $3 an hour VAs that weren't stepping up to what I needed. Second, I had pretty low expectations for what they could do. Like, I wasn't putting in a lot of vetting. I was just kind of going off basic criteria. And I was also not providing any leadership. I wasn't being there as a coach, as a leader. I was just hiring them and thinking that was all I had to do. And specifically for my e-commerce business, my Amazon online arbitrage business, I was trying to hire for someone that had direct experience in exactly what I was doing. I was like, oh, I could just hire someone that already knows how to do it. I won't have to do any training, any onboarding, and that ended up not being the case. So once I started figuring out what it is I wanted, what I was looking for, so then I started focusing on the hiring process. And so I flipped into really focusing on the character of the candidate rather than a nice looking resume, and building these systems that are going to uncover that great person, the vetting process that I need in order to identify the traits that I'm looking for. Someone that has initiative, drive, ambition, the kind of stuff that you cannot teach them. And I basically switched to trying to find someone that could handle any problem I threw at them, any task that I could teach, they would be able to run with it, instead of just someone who only did good in this narrow aspect. And so honestly, I stopped hiring anyone with experience in the Amazon space because, first off, they were usually working for a seller that was doing way less revenue than I was. And so that guy didn't really know what he was doing. They were learning these bad habits, these bad traits from him. And then I would have to just retrain them from scratch anyway. And second, you encounter the people that are working for multiple Amazon businesses. And so they're sharing the proprietary information between them. And I don't want that. So my ideal candidate was someone who did not have any background in Amazon specifically. Now, then comes the delegation aspect. Now, my philosophy was hiring to buy back my time so that I could allocate it towards the things that are most valuable to me, because there's a lot of tasks, especially in an e-commerce business, that take up a lot of my precious hours that aren't really effective. They're not revenue driving, but they still have to be done. And so those were the first things that I tried to get off my plate, whether it be the logistics, talking with the prep center, doing Google Sheets, actually making the purchases, opening cases with seller support and handling all that junk. So I just taught them the things that I already knew well and I knew that they could run with, so then I could then take that time I bought back and allocate it more towards the stuff that only I could do, that I was best at, that actually drove revenue for the Amazon business specifically. Now I have more time to source inventory, the lifeblood of the business. Now I have more time to reprice, making sure we're squeezing the most out of our inventory. I was not trying to delegate the most important things off my plate. It was just a way to move everything out of the way, so all I needed to focus on time-wise, mental-wise, was the revenue-driving activities. Now, eventually, I did start offloading those tasks. Like right now, my team handles all the repricing, all the sourcing, but it came through many iteration loops of them learning alongside me in order to get there. Like, my team's been with me for like 2-3 years at this point, so it took some time to get there. Then the onboarding. Throughout the onboarding process with team members I have currently, I was very heavy on providing context. Like, rather than just giving them the SOPs and this narrow task they're handling, I wanted them to understand the full picture. So like, one of the first documents I remember giving was a flow chart in like a Mira board of our full supply chain. So showing, here's what happens when we buy inventory. Here's where it goes to our prep center. Here's where it gets shipped to Amazon. Here's how it gets to the, like, even though they're only handling one piece of it, I remember distinctly giving them the full context so they understand how their piece fits into the whole puzzle. In those early hires, I remember I would just share the documents all at once and say like, yeah, just go through it. And I found they got super overwhelmed. And so what I did with my current team was slowly release access. Like, I have our training built out in a Notion, And so they wouldn't be able to move on into the next level until they like took a little test and proved that they understood this level. And each one layered on top of each other was compounding. For example, if it was like admin stuff, it was doing these calculations and then layering on the next part of like, okay, here's how you do the ASIN, here's how you do the MSCU, here's how you do inventory lab, rather than jumping right to like, here's how you make an inventory lab batch. Like building up the foundation was very important through my onboarding process. And so it was a ramp. I didn't just drop them off on day one and say, good luck, figure it out. It was like a gradual process, because the onboarding is where I set the expectations. Because also on the other side, if I'm super micromanaging throughout the onboarding and like checking their every hour, every day, like time tracking, I don't do that. So like if I was doing that, it basically trains them that you need my direction in order to get work done. And I didn't want that. I didn't want to have to always be the bottleneck, always be the one telling them what to do next. So through the onboarding, I set the tone of like, look, you got to figure stuff out on your own too. I'm not always going to be there. And then after the initial like onboarding, usually the first 30 days with my team, comes the never ending game of leadership. One that I had to learn the hard way, I would say, through people leaving or almost leaving. So there's a couple facets to that. And it's also my favorite part of having a team, especially an overseas team, is be able to be that coach and see these people like achieve what they want to achieve through my continuous leadership. Because yes, I want someone that they know how to do the job, they're getting paid to do it, but I want them to feel like empowered to do it, like they actually want to contribute and see success for the company and for themselves. So the first thing that honestly does a big hand in them caring about the business past just it being their job is performance incentives based on net profit. So my team, it's in their best interest to make more net profit in the long term. It helps the business, it helps me, and it also helps them. So it's a win-win situation for all of us. And so I don't have to constantly be so micromanaging on like these different things, because look, you have a piece of the pie. If your efforts lead to us doing well, you do well as a result. And so I think that is honestly a huge factor in it. And along with that, I have been extremely transparent with my team from the start. Nothing is off limits. In fact, they report to me on the information. So we have weekly KPI tracking, key performance indicators. So we track weekly sourcing spend, we track our feedback, we track our voice of the customer in Amazon, we track return rate, all that kind of stuff. And then on a monthly basis, they report to me all the information. And so that's inventory lab profit, that's net profit, that's our expenses year over year, all the information I share with them. And it means that they're able to take responsibility for increasing net profit in the business. If they know all the aspects of it, they aren't just guessing as to what's going to happen. They can see exactly all the leading and lagging indicators that are factoring into this net profit, essentially. And in that, I'm able to encourage their autonomy. So they see the numbers that are good, that are bad, and I will prompt them with the questions instead of just making my own decisions on everything. Like in that KPI report, especially them telling me what they think we should do this month in order to affect those numbers that are lagging. So it's like, okay, our sell-through rate was really bad in July. What should we do for August? Instead of just telling them what I think we should do, like building that autonomy, I think has led to us having good outcomes because they see all of the things that go into the outcome. Recognition is a big one too. Money's great, but I found, especially in Philippines culture, they value the recognition. So public recognition being within our Slack when someone does something good, but honestly, the private recognition is where I'm hammered. Like all the time, I'm giving them something they can be proud about. And so it creates that loop, that feedback loop of like, you do something great, you get rewarded for it with praise. And I think that has had a big impact on our team morale, our team culture, because especially in like BPO that they're used to, a lot of these companies will only talk to them if something is wrong. And so they never hear when things are going great. And so I do the opposite. I make sure they always know when something's going great. I want to have 2 times the amount of things I can praise them for and recognize them for than the issues I have. And so when I do have issues with them, it doesn't feel personal. It doesn't feel like only there when things are bad. And also I never punish mistakes. Sometimes they'll share with me a mistake they made and they'll be like, aren't you mad? And I'm like, no, we won't make the mistake again. I know, but I have nothing to be mad about. Like I made mistakes too in the business. For example, purchasing the wrong item, like the wrong size of an item when we were checking out. And I'm like, dude, I used to do that all the time. I don't like, that's fine. Just what do we do wrong time, and how can we not do it again? And I think that has gone a long way for our team morale and wanting to contribute. Instead of being so scared of like making all these mistakes, it's like, no, let's learn from the mistakes. Now, specific to the Amazon business, some things that I did, essentially, I wanted my role to be removing the roadblocks that they had in their way. So a lot of the business and online arbitrage is in Google Sheets. And so some people will just have it like this sheet where you just paste all the individual data, and they're taking like 5-10 minutes just to put in the data for this single lead that they found. And that takes away their time to allocate it towards sourcing. So I was like, look, this needs to be streamlined. This needs to be super quick, get the data and move on to the next one. And so first I bought a template from a good friend of mine, did that in Google Sheets, but I was like, I wanted to take it a step further. And so I hired a developer to actually use Keepa API to build this Google Sheet automatically. Data entry was taking a while, so I really built out our inventory sheet to have all these VLOOKUPs and like automatic formulas, so they didn't have to spend all this time doing monotonous data entry. They could allocate it towards more effective things. Building templates for seller support cases, so we have to keep repeating that every single time. And once OpenAI, ChatGPT started becoming popular, I started building integrations. So like one of the first ones I did was our order confirmations, our invoices from the suppliers we would purchase from. I built like an initial parsing tool that would just automatically put it into our inventory sheet to get a good starting place, so you shouldn't have to start right from scratch. Also, our prep center has a dashboard, a 3PL, and so I built a tool that was going to automatically put the inventory from our sheet into their dashboard, so we didn't have to do that manual step. So trying to find all these roadblocks that were taking up their time and eliminating them so we could allocate it more effectively. In online arbitrage sourcing, if you don't know, you like put the leads into a sheet, and I was always the bottleneck. It was like I was always the one that had to be checking these leads. And so I implemented a peer review system. So before it even got to me, someone else had to review it in the sheet and give their feedback if it was good purchase or not, and then it would come up to me. And finally, I gave my sales data access. So like my team checks on like a daily, weekly, I don't even know how often they check it, but they check the sales data to see what is actually selling, because in e-commerce, it's easy to source this inventory and not think about what happens after. But I wanted to keep that loop going so that they could optimize for net profit. And so they now check what is selling, how much is it selling for, how often is it selling, and that constant feedback loop over the years we've been doing it creates better outcomes, because they know what they did wrong on that one, what they could have done better, and keep analyzing those different Keepa graphs and how they ended up after we actually purchased them. So just keeping those constant feedback loops going of like them checking the sales, seeing what actually sold, how much it sold for, and how can we use that information to influence our further sourcing decisions. And now that brings us to present. So we do $1 million a year in revenue. Like I said, our profit has been growing year over year, and my time in the business has been declining year over year to focus more on our recruitment agency to help other business owners do basically the exact same thing. But everything I shared only works because I actually hired the right people from the start, because you can have all the systems, all the leadership, but if you're hiring the wrong people to begin with, it's not going to work out. So if you're ready to build your own team, then I have a full video breakdown right here on our process of hiring an A-player VA in 14 days, so you can build a killer team without making the same mistakes I did. But you have to watch it now while it's still fresh in your mind. I'll see you over there.